Hello everyone, this is Hakaym and welcome back to some more World of Warships, and today we are taking a last look at the Seattle. This is just going to be a battle. I'm not going to worry about the port because I already looked at it, fully upgraded. And I'm just going to talk about the Seattle, kind of what to expect. And I honestly, I'm not a big fan of the Seattle. It's so situational, and that's kind of the US and light cruiser line. Now we are playing on neighbors, playing tier 9, which is actually really nice, but there is in fact some carriers, which is a good demonstration of its AA. So it's really good demonstration to show everything, especially when talking about the light cruisers AA, which is really fantastic. Can't say enough about that. That's one good thing about the light cruisers. USN cruisers, AA is just fantastic. It's just downright fantastic. But then it comes down to how does it face off against other ships, because carriers aren't always a very common feature within the game. Well, against destroyers, and there's only one destroyer on both sides, because since the introduction of the USN light cruisers and all this radar is just aggravating. Like, I understand, like, coming from both sides and hearing from both perspectives, hearing from a DD main and also myself coming from a cruiser slash somewhat BB main. I understand the frustration on both sides. I understand the frustration of having 5 or 6 DDs per side and how annoying that is when you're trying to be a battleship player. But at the exact same time, hearing and understanding how the DD mains feel, I understand their frustration as well. So, unfortunately, there's not a lot in the way of destroyers that we can really talk about. There's only one, and I don't quite remember whether or not we'll actually see it. Now, coming back to how she faces, let's talk about how she faces off against battleships and cruisers. Battleships, she can, given enough time, obviously as any good cruiser player can melt down a battleship. And this is really beneficial if you have IFHE, which is a really big must for these higher tier USN light cruisers. Because the IFHE is allowing you to penetrate the much thicker armor that high tier battleships and even high tier cruisers have on their armor. So it's a must. It's necessary. Without that, you are going to struggle for damage and to gain experience and to earn any form of money. So that is a huge must. But against lightly armored cruisers, even without the IFHE, it's quite devastating. Now, the Seattle, like I said, is very situational. What it really loves is islands. It loves to camp islands, lob shells over downrange. Yes, you will have to learn how and accurately judge what lead you need to give a target, and every ship's going to be different. For example, that Chapayev is actually a very fast cruiser, so you're going to need a lot more of a lead. But at longer ranges, you're going to struggle to hit smaller ships, such as a destroyer, for example. And the range on the Seattle is not particularly great. It is 14.7, but even at 14.7 kilometers, you are going to struggle just to get those shells to land, because it's in essence, it's Atlanta at tier 9. Granted, not as many as guns, but as far as its floating arcs, very similar. So, I mean, we're getting some hits, but as you can see, it does struggle at kind of similar ranges. So, the best target for the USN light cruisers and Seattle, for this instance, the Seattle, is battleships. It loves battleships because battleships are a bit more larger and clumsier. So, they're more easier to actually land your shells. Now, our team's doing a really good job. We've actually taken out 3 ships. They've already lost the destroyer. We've yet to lose our destroyer. And now their Iowa is in a unfortunate condition. But you saw there, that salvo right there. We landed 8 shells, only did around 5,000 amounts of damage. And that's generally what you're going to be expecting to see. With the use of IFHE, your chance of fire is reduced, but even with that, you still get a decent amount of fires normally. So fires are definitely another mainstay and an aspect that is where you're going to be getting your damage is just the use of fires. But at the moment, as you can see, the enemy team isn't really pushing up towards C, so it's actually probably going to be a really good idea to try to maybe find a better position. But as you can see, with floating arcs, we're able to get our shots way over islands and actually land on this enemy Ismo, who is starting to push up. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. Maybe people, there are probably people who enjoy the USN light cruisers. I don't much care for them. They're not my most favorite. The floating arcs, I've never been a fan of the Atlanta. So USN light cruisers are, they're only somewhat enjoyable. I just think they're way too situational, but they're good. I mean, they have that power of the radar, which is USN light cruiser radar, and with the Seattle, it's the same range as your detect. So as soon as you're detected, you can actually pop your radar and instantly spot the enemy DD, which is quite strong and very aggravating for any destroyer captains out there, and I myself have experienced that, and it's very, very frustrating. But it also has Hider, which is extremely beneficial because you're able to essentially push against enemy destroyers, which can be very difficult if you obviously can't see any torpedoes incoming. But you can see how quickly that Ismo has melted. He was full health when he started coming around that corner, and he's nearly dead. He's burning quite nicely. And once again, this is kind of what is the main staple of the Seattle, is the use of fires. So first skill for us, and we're sitting at about 80k, but in that time we've lost actually 4 ships. And the enemy team has actually almost caught up on us. Now there's another aspect of, which is kind of a negative aspect of the USN light cruisers, is the fact of cyclones. Cyclones are not your friend when you are in a USN light cruiser, but sometimes they can be. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Great against destroyers. Even against some cruisers, you could easily wipe out because its AP is viable, especially against broadside targets. Do switch to AP, you can actually deal either citadels depending on the armor thickness, or you can do just normal penetration a lot better than your HE would be able to. But against battleships, you're going to struggle. Unless that battleship's very low in health and is, you know, dumb enough to actually show you a lot of broadside to where your AP could do a little bit more damage, you're probably going to die. And that's the thing about the USN light cruisers, is the fact that their armor is very, very thin. And that's a double-edged sword too, because you can be easily citadeled, or you can actually be overpinned, and that's really what you're almost always hoping for right now, is the chance of being overpinned. And looky there is our second kill. And actually earned 2 fires at the very end there, and that's RNG for you. Now, one nice thing about the use of radar and Cyclone is you can actually use your radar when a Cyclone is in effect, and you have the full view of the entire screen of your radar. So you can actually land shells on enemy targets and they are not able to hit you because you're still still outside that 8-kilometer detect. Now, as you can see, where the indicator where it's showing Cyclone says 9 kilometers now, that's because of our radar. Once the radar is up, it will actually switch back down to 8 kilometers. So at the moment, we're doing fairly well. Now, here's another thing about cyclones, is planes are actually very hard to detect. As you can see on the mini map there, our poor Gneisenau is actually being torp dropped and being bombed by the enemy CV, but there's nothing I can do because they're actually outside my AA detect range. And yeah, it's something you do have to keep in mind. And unfortunately for us, we've actually just ran into the Duke of York and the enemy Gneisenau. Now the Duke of York, even with its HE volley, can actually citadel you. Especially if you look at like the Conqueror, which is what you're going to be seeing. Their HE volley can actually citadel you, and it can be quite devastating, but unfortunately this Gneisenau is pushing around, probably trying to go for a torp drop. I do switch over to AP, because once again, broadside target, even such as this, it's probably almost always better to use your AP, but as anyone is well aware, Gneisenau has torpedoes, and more than likely that is what he is trying to do. I probably should have popped Hydro here to help my friend out, and I probably should have also pointed out I am joined by Dread in the Missouri. But this Gneisenau is just going to go down, and somehow I kind of sniped the kill. Enemy Gneisenau is officially dead. And any moment now, I think we should actually see the torpedoes incoming, but unfortunately, Dread has come around the corner to the enemy Duke of York, who actually did switch over to AP, which is good. Good. I like seeing that. I hate always seeing HE volleys from British battleships. So at the moment, our team's doing well. We're down on caps. But we're ahead on points because we've actually managed to take out more ships than they have, as well as we obviously have more ships than they do. But we should actually start capturing B, but unfortunately our Gneisenau has just gone down to the North Carolina. I do pop my radar just to see if I can get sights on the Duke of York, and as you can see, just now our AA is actually able to start helping our friend. Unfortunately, Dread is now being focused by the enemy CV, which is not a bad choice, especially considering this is later game and a lot of AA is generally knocked out because of HE. So this is usually the best chance for a CV to actually strike a more AA spec cruiser or battleship is later game. Unfortunately, wasn't able to really use my radar that beneficial, just because it did eventually drop out. But for us, RA is actually really nice because we actually haven't taken that much HE damage. But unfortunately for Dread, he is going to go down. CV did wait a moment. And has caused flooding, and any moment now we are going to lose Dread to the enemy Taiho. And enemy team has kind of evened up as far as number of ships, but they're still obviously down 3 ships to our 5, or better yet, 2 ships to our 5. And it looks like the enemy CV is now trying to come in, but our AA is fairly potent. Now this is not a fully spec'd out captain. I don't have advanced firing training or basic firing training or anything like that, so the range is definitely reduced, and that's another bad thing about Cyclones, is the fact that your long range AA, your long range aura can't really do its job because the planes aren't spotted until they're well within very close quarters. And now we have torpedo planes incoming, turning in. Obviously, more than likely might take a torpedo. If you take one, that would be fine. Do actually get hit by a secondary torpedo, but it did not arm. Now another torp plane's incoming, but we also have the North Carolina incoming as well. Do slow up to try to avoid this very dangerous position right now, just because of that North Carolina, but we should be able to at least turn away. And once again, Cyclones is not your friend while you are in a lightly armored cruiser such as the Seattle, because a North Carolina, even as angled as we are, still can do pretty good damage. We do have a heal, so we are going to at least manage to repair some of this. But we at least now are officially having some backup. Buffalo is coming in. There is only the North Carolina and the Taiho left available. Do pop our radar to actually begin focusing down that North Carolina. This is, I'm not a big fan of this because I've been on the receiving end of the radar use in a cyclone, and it's frustrating because you can't shoot back. There's nothing you can do, but it's very, very strong. This North Carolina is essentially being focused by myself, and I'm just now getting detected just because the cyclone is actually starting to lift. There we have just earned Confederate. And this buffalo is charging in. As you can see, I am being careful because once again, as that buffalo just met his demise to the North Carolina's guns, that battleship can citadel us and can end our day. So I am trying to be cautious. We do use our last heal, but since, in fact, the cyclone is now lifted, our AA aura is actually fully back to its normal range, so we can actually deal damage at 7.2 kilometers. So very, very nice, and I highly recommend this mod. This mod right down here, it is part of the Aslan's WoW mod. Basically keeps track of all your secondaries and AA. So one quick look there, you can actually see how much of our AA is still left around. So beneficial. I think it's nice to have around. And it looks like the enemy Taiho is actually finally spotted. Looks like he was in fact A. And now we can just have fun. Taiho is not really able to do much. I still have 3 charges of defensive AA, and it's essentially, well, there's essentially not much this enemy Taiho can really do towards us, or even be able to take us all out. Even the enemy CV is getting in on this action. You can see our AA is actually starting to do its job, because the CV is running out of room of really being able to trying to avoid the Seattle's AA. Now, as always, whenever a CV is spotted, everyone kind of loses their minds and just really tries to get as much damage because Taiho really can't do all that much. It really does have to rely on its planes. But with the cyclone no longer in effect, it's not that big of a deal. And unfortunately for us, the Tirpitz runs into us. I was trying to get my back guns into play just to get extra damage, and this Tirpitz throws its torps at a ship 8 kilometers away. Don't really know why, but this Taiho is going to go down. Akatsuki is going to go down to secondaries, but does manage to get his torpedoes away. There we have just earned high caliber, and any moment this Taiho is going to get his final kill, but is going to lose to this Akatsuki. So not a bad game. So as you can see, we earned a victory, brought home 292,345 silver, 6,734 XP. We earned high caliber and Confederate. We did 177,792 points of damage, 321 shell hits, 17 plane shot downs. The Seattle does have a very high rate of fire, I believe about 8 seconds. So you can get a lot of shells down range, which is really what the Seattle needs, because without that high rate of fire, you can't get the damage that is essential for gaining experience and credits, and also dealing damage to enemy forces to earn a victory. So having that high rate of fire is very, very beneficial, but it's nothing compared to, say, the Worcester, or even, say, against the Neptune, which is essentially what the Seattle is very, very similar like. As far as kills, we did manage 3 kills, 14 fires. Not too bad. Like I said, IFHE does reduce the chance of fire, but with that high rate of fire, you do get a fairly good chance of actually getting a lot of fires. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is, for the Seattle to get use of her guns in play, it does mean you have to show a lot of broadsides, and that's not good. That's not usually what you want to do, so that's something you have to keep in mind and be very well aware of, not to show a lot of broadside when you are Your only major hope of not being, citadel to death is getting overpens. We did get one assisted base capture, which is really, really nice. Both myself and Dread were top of the team. Base XP for myself was 2,739. Dread did come in second with 1,774. Planes are a beautiful thing, as they do offer you a lot of experience and money. And we did deal quite a bit of damage against the enemy Taiho. The enemy Taiho, we did around 38,000, I believe, just a little over half of the damage or the health pool of the enemy Taiho. But the Ismo, we did about 55,860 points of damage, which is definitely where a lot of our damage came from. Iowa with only 20,207. So with experience and money, it does really depend on the percentile of the health pool of the enemy forces that you do. So more percentile you do, more experience and money you will gain. So that's generally how the economics of World of Warships works. As far as high explosive, it only did 116,595. Armor piercing is 13,117. Like I said, armor piercing is beneficial, but it is 152 millimeters, so it does have less ability to fully penetrate through thicker armor. But fires is definitely another thing where you're going to get a lot of your damage from. I would be very surprised if it was not very common for any light cruisers to not earn Wither or Arsonist, because once again, fires are really almost the bread and butter of the USN light cruisers. So don't be surprised with that. You'll probably get Wither or Arsonist quite a bit. As far as the aircrafts we were actually managed to destroy, if it weren't for the fact of the Cyclone, our aircraft count would actually be a lot higher. But since that Cyclone was in effect, it was definitely a lot more difficult for actually us to shoot down planes. But it's alright. So quick look at the Seattle. I'm definitely very grateful to be actually moving on from the Seattle and onto the Worcester and kind of finishing up the line. We'll be taking a look at the Worcester here in a few days, and I'll give you my thoughts and opinions on the Worcester. But this is going to be it for this video. We are saying goodbye to the Seattle, and we're moving on. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you saw, hit the like and subscribe button. You guys have a great and fantastic day. Zaijian.